Well, it is the Toby Gribbon Show. We're broadcasting live from London today ahead of tomorrow's coronation. And we're joined live in the studio now by Saad Salman, also known as the Royal Watcher, who you arrived in London the other day, right?
Yes, I arrived in London 2 days ago, specifically for the coronation.
Wow. And you were saying before we came on that you've been in London 4 times within the last year, which is a lot.
Yes, all by coincidence. I was here last year for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and then I was back again for a private visit a few months later, and I was inside Buckingham Palace when the Queen passed away.
Wow.
Which was just a very eerie coincidence, especially given it was my first ever visit to the palace. Yeah. So, and then I was back again a few weeks later, and this is my 4th visit, all within a year.
It's kind of very lucky that you were there, or unlucky. Depends how you see it. It was a sad event, but I guess it was nice to be there, maybe.
I know. The coincidence, given my kind of work with royalty for the past almost 7 years now, it was such a surreal moment to be inside the palace when such a momentous occasion was taking place.
Yeah. So, how important is it for you to be here for the coronation itself?
So I knew I was going to come for the coronation. The moment they announced it, I booked my hotel and I was ready to go. I think for me, seeing this sort of pageantry and this display of royal splendor after 70 years is so important. Yeah. I come from 2 Commonwealth countries, one of which the king is also our head of state. So for me, it's kind of a very symbolic feeling to be here as well.
And are you hoping to see part of the procession tomorrow and see the king himself?
My hopes are high. I'm going to try to get a spot. However, I'm not one of those people who's going to camp out. Yeah. I think that's a bit too over the top even for me. I'm going to try to get there a reasonable time. And then if I see it, well and good. If not, I have a lot of coverage to do and I have to think about my work as well. So I'll probably be the better option would be to stay in my hotel and cover it by watching the coverage.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can stay at a hotel and still experience the buzz every day. Yeah. And if you're camping out, I suppose you're maybe stuck there. You don't get the chance to go around and see other places.
Exactly. And knowing from my experience for the past 2 or 3 events that I have been there for, there's no signal outside Buckingham Palace. Yeah. So trying to cover anything live is going to be a disaster anyway.
Yeah, that's a nightmare. So what was your background and how did you actually get interested in royal history and traditions?
So I come from a bit of an aristocratic family myself, and I've kind of grown up with lots of kind of colorful displays and jewels and that sort of thing. Yeah. So I was interested in that as a child, and then technically I just kind of moved on to following royalty. I started looking at blogs and follow them from like a bit of a weekly basis. And then when I was in grade 11, I started the Royal Watcher the night before one of my major final exams.
Wow.
So, and then 7 years on, it's my full-time job. I worked through it through school, through university, and once I graduated, it's my work.
So how did you do in that exam?
Pretty good, actually, all things considered. It was a social studies exam, so kind of makes sense. But I was very lucky that I was able to manage both things side by side.
Yeah. So I guess it because you did well in the exam, it wasn't a regret setting up this blog the night before.
Definitely, yeah. No, I think that's been one of the things I've been very lucky at. The way that the Royal Watcher has really helped me rather than been a hindrance to my life. It's been helping me academically. It's given me lots of experience with writing and then also kind of all sorts of things that I cover, which have in some way or other really formed what I studied in school and life.
So how do you plan to cover the coronation itself?
So I have a main article which is going to be covering live details of the coronation. We have one article with all the details, and it's going to be updated live. So this event is happening. This is going to happen next. And then we're going to have brief notes on whatever's... So the king's going to wear this. This crown will be presented. Who's going to do it? Very factual, very matter of fact. And that's kind of what the Royal Watcher is known for, where we take lots of information, make it into succinct articles, have just basic facts of the best pictures, what anything notable they're wearing in terms of jewelry, orders, and insignia, and then move on with that.
Are people quite interested in the things that they're wearing?
Yes, definitely. I think there's a lot of speculation if there will be tiaras or tiaras.
Yeah.
I know from my sources, I've seen the invitation of one of the foreign queens that's been invited, and the foreign royal guests have been told not to wear tiaras.
Oh.
So that queen was a bit disappointed because her husband's coronation had 2 tiara events, so she was judging the British a bit harsh.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think this is going to be a display unlike what we've ever seen before. It's being modernized and keeping with traditional stuff, but I think today we saw the Prince of Wales arrive at a rehearsal in the big robes of the Order of the Garter. So there will be some traditional elements that are retained.
Yeah, and there's a rumour that the Princess of Wales is going to be wearing some kind of flower crown. Do you know anything about that?
I do not. I mean, what my hope is that they're going to do what they've done for the state opening of Parliament, where the guests are all going to be in day dress and morning coats and uniforms and stuff. But the main royal family will be the King and Queen will be, of course, in gowns, uniforms, their big crowns. Yeah. But the other members of the royal family should hopefully be in long gowns, orders, and tiaras. This whole flower crown rumor, the palace has refused to confirm it. Ooh. So I am hoping that it is just a rumor. Yeah. And if she is going to wear a flower crown, there's a bunch of diamond floral tiaras in the collection that she could pick. So that may be an allusion to that, I'm hoping.
Yeah. Why do you hope it's a rumor? What's wrong with a flower crown?
I think especially for me and a lot of other people who are interested in the coronation, they've been looking forward to this moment. In 1953, the coronation brought together all of their nobility, foreign royal guests, and the royal family. They were fully decked out in their best jewels, peers' robes, coronets, the whole shebang. And this time, given that it is already so dressed down, the Princess of Wales is really our kind of only hope of seeing new jewels and kind of this like traditional display, which we would not otherwise see.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see tomorrow. And there's all sorts of things about it being a modernised coronation and a cut-price coronation as well. Is this something that... how different will the coronation be today or tomorrow than 1953?
I think there's 2 main aspects which are different. The first one is kind of the length of the ceremony. The Queen's coronation was 3 hours. It was full of all sorts of ancient rituals, a lot of which was televised, but some aspects weren't. With the king, it's only going to be 1 hour long. Yeah. And they're really putting it all into that 1 hour. Is going to be jam-packed of all sorts of events and things happening. They have released order of service, so we do know what's going to be happening in a minute-by-minute detail at this point. There's not going to be any homage of peers and stuff. Only the Prince of Wales will be bowing before the king and giving his fealty, but otherwise none of the aristocrats or any members of the extended royal family will be doing that. Yeah. At the same time, the procession has been shortened. The Queen had I think, 5-hour procession through London, whereas this time they suspect that from one point it's going to take the procession around 22 minutes to pass, and they have to go from the Abbey to Buckingham Palace. So it's not too long. Yeah. I mean, they'll be in an ancient carriage, which is reportedly very uncomfortable, so they'll probably think it's very long for 2 people in their 70s, but the rest of us will hopefully... I mean, the downside of this kind of shortened procession means that less people will be able to see it. That's why space is at a premium. Yeah. Even though people were not allowed to camp out, they have been camping out for the past couple of days. Yeah. So it's kind of unsure what is going to happen. And then the kind of second way that it is kind of a cut price coronation is the amount of guests invited. At the Queen's coronation, it took them, I think, 16 months to kind of set up the Abbey, build lots of extra stands to hold 8,000 guests. This time there's only going to be 1,000. Yeah. I mean, I'm Canadian. At 1953, there were 700 Canadian guests alone. Wow. And at this point, I think there's less than a dozen. So it is quite a different kind of situation. It's reflective of a more modern age and kind of how Britain and the Commonwealth is doing. At the same time, they are keeping so much of that traditional pageantry, and hopefully lots of aspects will be there.
And people aren't allowed to camp out, as you say, but nobody's stopping them. And it seems like, even though it's not something that you choose to do yourself, it seems like there's a massive crowd and everybody's so excited.
Yes, I think I know a bunch of people who are planning on camping out tonight or even have been camping out for the past few days, which I personally don't understand, but I respect them for their dedication. It was the same thing, I think, for when we saw people queuing to pay their respects to the Queen, and we saw kind of huge queues all the way down London, and people feel this kind of association with the monarchy where they're willing to do anything to be witness to this historic occasion.
Yeah. Now, there's something I've seen throughout the week that's really confused me. Maybe you know the secret, but I've seen the Royal Standard in 2 places at once, which, by my understanding, should be impossible.
Yes, I think what they have announced is that the King's Standard is traditionally at Clarence House, where the King and Queen reside, but it is now going to also be at Buckingham Palace, which is their official residence in London. So it's part of this transition where traditionally we would have kind of been sure of what is happening, but Buckingham Palace is basically the reason they're doing it is because they want to signify that this is an official residence and it's going to retain that status. But the king is physically going to be at Clarence House. And until the Buckingham Palace renovation is finished, it's going to continue to be 2 flags.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's always been that if you see the Royal Standard, you know the king or the queen or whoever is in. Is this a bad thing that it's changed? I'm kind of have mixed feelings about this. I'm not too sure if it is a bad thing because there's trying to retain some elements. I mean, from if you think about it from a very strict point, it's a bit kind of ridiculous in a sense to have them raise the flags at both times and then not being sure where the king is at any given point. But it's kind of reflective of the way they're trying to incorporate the current situation, which is that Buckingham Palace is going to be under renovation for the next couple of years and keep it as the center of the monarchy. Yeah, maybe it's good for security to have a decoy. Definitely, yeah. Yeah. Now, do you think that the reaction to this coronation is going to be similar to that of events with the Queen, you know, the Queen's coronation and the Jubilee last year? I think it is definitely a different mood. The public is not necessarily with the Queen. She had a lifelong kind of service and a huge reign that people were celebrating. And there was this, she had a very kind of popular image where it's a bit different with King Charles. However, I think he has really redeeming qualities, and it will be, there's kind of all this talk about protests, that sort of thing, but the way people have been coming out, and I've met a lot of people who've traveled from around the world to see this coronation in person, there is a lot of popular support, and it's going to be more well received than lots of people expect. Yeah, well, many thanks for joining us. I'll let you get on to your next interview because you've just done the BBC, so you've probably got something exciting up next. So feel free to have any chocolates and biscuits, by the way, when you leave. Wonderful. Thank you.